Climate change is everywhere. It's in news headlines, policy debates, and social media campaigns. But beneath the urgency and activism, there's a fundamental question worth exploring. Is climate change primarily caused by human activity, or are natural factors more responsible? Today, I'll walk you through both sides of this debate. First, I'll explain these arguments that support the consensus view that human activity, especially the burning of fossil fuels, is driving climate change. Then I'll present three arguments that support the minority perspective, which questions whether humans are truly responsible for the cause of climate change. The first argument from the consensus side is that rising levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are directly linked to human activity. According to NASA, atmospheric CO2 levels have increased from about 280 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution to over 420 parts per million today. The primary sources of the rise of burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. The argument is simple and powerful. Humans emit greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases trap heat. Global temperatures rise. Climate models that factor in human emissions closely match the warming we observe, while models that include only natural factors like solar variation or volcanic activity don't. As we can see in these charts here, the chart on this side shows CO2 emissions since the 1800s, with it rising at about the 1850s, 1860s at the time of the Industrial Revolution. And this chart over here starts at 1860 to now and shows the global temperature rising at a consistent rate with the CO2 emissions. Supporters for the human cause theory also point to observable changes in the environment. The Arctic is losing ice at around 12% per decade. Glaciers around the world are shrinking, and sea levels have risen about 8 inches in the last century with an accelerating rate. They also highlight an increase in extreme weather events, more frequent and intense hurricanes, heat waves, wildfires, and droughts. These events, they argue, align with what climate models predicted would happen if greenhouse gases continued rising. And these charts here, we have a graph of ice melting. You can see it starts out and has been slowly dropping since then. And on this side, we have a graph of sea level. See, it's rising. Perhaps the most frequently cited argument is the scientific consensus. We often hear that 97% of climate scientists agree that humans are the primary cause of climate change. This figure is meant to end the debate. If nearly everyone agrees, what more is there to discuss? But here's the issue. Critics say that the figure is based on cherry-picked data. The original study by John Cook and colleagues looked at thousands of studies, but many of them weren't directly about the cause of climate change. Others argue that classification system was flawed or overly broad. Then there's the case of Michael Mann's hockey stick graph, which used tree ring data to show a dramatic spike in global temperatures during the 20th century. While it became the symbol of the climate crisis, critics say Mann excluded data that didn't fit the trend, making the spike look more dramatic than it really was. This controversy has raised questions about the bias in climate research and whether some results are being exaggerated to drive political action. One of the most compelling arguments from the minority view is that Earth's climate has always been changing, long before the human industry existed. We've had ice ages, warm periods, and cooling phases, all without SUVs or coal plants. For example, during the medieval warm period, roughly 900 to 1300 AD, temperatures in some regions were as warm or warmer than today. Before that, natural shifts in Earth's orbit, solar activity, and volcanic eruptions led to massive climate shifts. The current warming trend could very well be a part of one of these natural cycles or something we don't fully understand. From this perspective, blaming humans may be the cause of correlation without causation. This graph here shows global climate from a lot further than the 1800s, and we can see early on here is a medieval warm period it's talking about, and it dips down to eventual an ice age, and then we jump back up to where we are today. Climate models are often used to predict future warming, but critics argue they're notoriously imperfect. These models are built on assumptions about emissions, feedback loops, and cloud behavior, many which are hard to test. Some early models predicted much more warming by 2020 than we've actually seen. Others struggle to account for short term cooling events or regional anomalies. From the minority perspective, putting blind faith in these models is risky, especially when major policy decisions and economic sacrifices are based on them. If the models are wrong, we may be spending trillions to solve a problem we don't fully understand. The final minority argument is about how climate narrative is used politically. They argue that fear around climate change is something used to push specific policies, like carbon taxes, green energy subsidies, or regulations that benefit certain industries. There's also a concern that dissenting scientists are silenced or defunded, creating a false appearance of the total argument. In this view, climate change has become a moral and political weapon used to stifle debate and rally support, not just an issue of science. Does this mean climate change isn't happening? This doesn't mean climate change isn't really happening, but it raises the question, are we being told the full unbiased truth, or just the politically convenient or just a political convenient version? To wrap up, climate change is real. The earth is warming, but the cause and response are still worth debating. The consensus view is strong evidence, but also weaknesses, especially around the transparency and modeling. The minority view may not have all the answers, but it asks important questions, and in science, questions are just as valuable as answers. Personally, I lean toward the minority perspective, not because I deny climate change, but because I believe the discussion has been narrowed too quickly and too politically. Thank you for your time.